Welcome to the Dan Lab. Today, Chavan is demonstrating phage isolation and concentration by cesium chloride gradient. This protocol is useful for concentrating a lot of phage into a single, very highly concentrated, stable, sterile sample. Because they are stored with cesium chloride, stocks from this method require 2 days of dialysis in 2 batches of 1 liter phage buffer prior to use. For this protocol, you will need cesium chloride, phage buffer with 1 millimolar calcium chloride, a tabletop centrifuge, an ultracentrifuge, and appropriate plastic tubes. It's important that they're plastic, an analytical balance, forceps, a ring stand with a tube holder and a receptacle, 3 ml syringes and small needles, screw top microtubes, and then a squeeze bottle of water and towels to clean up. A flashlight is optional but might help you see your phage band. See the description for the phage buffer recipe. Leading up to today, Chavan has proliferated a large batch of pure phages. He used 30 layover plates to proliferate the phages, then precipitated them out with sodium chloride and PEG, and ultimately resuspended his phage sample in the phage buffer with calcium chloride. Yesterday, he plated some of this sample to check the titer and ensure that today's phage sample has at least 10 to the 8 plaque-forming units per mil. Today, he added cesium chloride to the samples and gently mixed to completely dissolve before moving the sample to ultracentrifuge tubes. The tubes have been balanced precisely using an analytical scale. It's important to be very exact in balancing for ultracentrifugation. Always seek proper training before using an ultracentrifuge. Malfunction is catastrophic. Follow all operation guidelines. These ultracentrifuge tubes hold about 10 mils. Fill, leaving less than half a centimeter of space at the top of the tube. Then correct volume and balance tubes with additional phage buffer with the cesium chloride in it. Carefully load the tubes into the router's tube holders and screw on the caps firmly. Be sure the tubes are clean before loading. Wipe with a Kim wipe if you need. They should be quite secure, but not impossibly tight. The cesium chloride serves to form a density gradient in the ultracentrifuge tube, and by spinning, we're going to concentrate all of the phage, which are a uniform density, into one band in the tube. Load each tube holder onto the monkey bar around the rotor. Each tube holder has 2 little arms that will grab onto the bar. Make sure both hooks of the tube holders are grabbing onto the monkey bar in their correct position. When loading, match the number on the tube with the number on the rotor. Pairs of exactly balanced tubes must be placed opposite one another in the rotor. Hold tubes upright to avoid spilling. If you spill, you must rebalance your tubes. Here we see an incorrectly hung tube where both arms of the holder have not grabbed the monkey bar. Check the rotor. All tubes must properly hang onto the rotor and the numbers must be correctly paired. Pull gently down on the tube holder to ensure that they're properly hung. Turn on the ultracentrifuge and set the temperature to 4 degrees, RPMs to 38,000, and the time to 24 hours. Then open the top door. With both hands, carefully grab onto the sides of the rotor and lift straight up. Move the rotor and load it inside the ultracentrifuge by positioning the rotor directly on top of the motor and slowly lowering it down into the ultracentrifuge until it sits firmly and securely on the motor. Do a little test spin of the rotor to make sure it's seated properly. Close the door, turn on the centrifuge vacuum. The run cannot begin until a vacuum is established. Press the start button. Wait to ensure that the pressure drops to vacuum, the temperature is dropping towards 4 degrees, and that the machine is running smoothly as it reaches its desired speed. Come back and check on the centrifuge periodically throughout the day and return immediately at the end of the run to collect your samples, which will be 24 hours from now. When the run is complete, tap the button to release the vacuum. Open the door and turn off the machine. Carefully remove the rotor and return it to its pedestal, remembering to keep it perfectly upright. Remove the tube holders to their rack. And then unscrew the cap and keep the caps and corresponding tube holders together. Use forceps to grab the rim of the ultracentrifuge tube. Be careful not to let the forceps touch the liquid. Remove the ultracentrifuge tube completely to a rack. After all the tubes have been removed from the tube holders, put the first sample to be collected on a stand and firmly secure it above a biohazard waste receptacle. If your sample has only one species of phage, you should be able to see a thick white band in the area between the liquid surface and the middle of the tube. The thickness and the cloudiness of the band depend on the concentration of phages. With Bacillus subtilis, you may see an off-white or yellowish cap sitting on top of the liquid. This is likely debris and does not contain phage. Quickly retrieve your phage sample, as this cap will slowly start to sink down into the liquid and can then ruin your phage band. If your band is faint, turn down the lights and use a flashlight to help you see it. Note that a higher concentration of cesium chloride will cause the phage band to rise in the tube. A lower concentration will cause the phage band to appear lower down in the tube, so you can adjust your cesium concentration accordingly. We're going to remove the phage band with a syringe and a small needle. So Chavin prefers a rigid small gauge needle and a 1 ml syringe. You don't want to collect a lot of volume, so a 1 ml syringe should be sufficient. Insert the needle about 1 millimeter below the phage band with the beveled side of the needle facing up. Remember not to put your fingers on the opposite side of the tube from the needle. That's a hazard. Gently pierce the tube by slightly pressuring the needle tip on the wall of the tube and then slowly rotating until the needle drills through the tube wall. Be patient and be gentle, but be firm because you do need to puncture the tube. At this point, slowly insert the needle all the way into the tube, and then begin to pull back the plunger and wiggle the needle around to collect the entire phage band. Try to minimize the volume of liquid that you collect, but collect the entire visible phage band. Expel the concentrated cesium chloride phage sample into your 2 ml screw cap microtubes and label for long-term storage. Store at 4 degrees Celsius and repeat this for all samples. If you fail to collect the entire phage band in your first attempt with the needle, after expelling your sample, go back and collect the rest of it. Keep in mind that the second sample will likely be a lower concentration than your first sample. Try not to collect extra stuff that's not part of the phage band. That will just decrease your final concentrations. And finally, clean up after yourself. Cesium chloride can corrode metals, so it is important to clean the tube holders, the centrifuge, and anything else that cesium chloride may have contacted immediately after use. Feel free to reach out with any questions, and thanks for stopping by.